Hey guys, welcome to the Mental Health Initiative podcast. We're here today with Bill Lennan. Bill Lennan is currently the head of operations and the co-founder of the HEART program, which is a service designed for high school students that teaches them skills to maintain and improve their mental wellness. It's actually the same. It's actually a service that our school, Saratoga High School, uses, and it's been using that for, pretty much like since the start of distance learning for our junior year or this year of high school. So yeah, it's something that we like interact with almost on a weekly basis, and it's been like really helpful for us. But before I like get into all that, I noticed that you had a like associate's degree in like automotive technology, and
Mhm.
just like I just want to like know like what it's like because I don't know, I'm kind of into cars, so like that was just something like I want to know about.
Um, so when I was in college, I spent 7 years in college
Hmm.
because I'm really curious, right?
Right.
And good research, by the way, to figure that out. That's good.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that I got was like it was a vocational technical school, basically.
Right.
That was part of the university, and and I got to work on cars.
Oh, nice.
And
Nice.
yeah, and I was really into cars at that point in time. I still really like cars. They're super
Yeah, they're,
fun.
they're nice. They're nice
Yeah,
machines.
they're very interesting. Yeah. But I went to class, and from total segueing that to the mental health skills. Part of what I learned in that place was the value of persistence, because we had to fix real world problems. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
we had teachers and other students bringing us broken cars, and
Yeah.
we had to figure it out, right? And our instructor basically was like, "Here, team, go to town, work on it," right? And we had to figure it out and figure out what parts and and fix it. And so I learned a lot from that, but I also learned a lot about working with teams. And I had this interesting experience where I was actually mentoring one of the other students,
Hmm.
because he was a much better mechanic than me, but he almost couldn't read.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wait.
And so, well, so this is a school that's got super broad socioeconomic um, input, right? And so he didn't grow up seeing a value in reading,
They just
right?
decided like not to learn to read.
Well, it wasn't a big thing for his family, and it wasn't a big thing for him. And all of a sudden, he was 20 years old and he wanted to be a mechanic, and he couldn't read the textbooks mostly, right? That was a big challenge. And he couldn't read the shop manuals. And so he actually wanted to get a job at a dealership, and one of the requirements was to get able to read the shop manuals, right? And
Wait,
even
how do you
though,
like basic road signs and stuff like that? I'm confused. How do you go
yeah,
20 years of your life without knowing how to read? Like
he
restaurant
was
use.
he was reading at like first grade level.
Oh, okay. So he
Yeah,
could okay, he could sort of
yeah.
read.
So he recognized the shape of the stop sign, right?
Oh, and
So
that's like how we that's how
yeah,
he okay, okay.
yeah.
All right.
So all these different signs, he recognized the shapes, and also he in his head kept track of all the places he was going,
Mm-hmm.
right? But he didn't really, and his math skills were horrible, right? So I was coaching him through all this stuff, right? And he understood tools way better than I did, and he had much better mental models for how cars worked.
Hmm.
But it was interesting that he didn't learn to read as a kid because he didn't have the right mental context, right? And he actually said this to me one day. I wish when I was 7 or 8 or 9, someone had said that I would one day want to read these books, because I would have learned how to read way back then, because
Yeah,
I would have understood the value of what it was 10 years out, right? And
exactly. Yeah.
that's stuck in my head, because that's part of the reason why we do what we do, right?
Right.
Is that
Yeah.
if right now you may be calm, collected, school's a cakewalk, social's a cakewalk, COVID's a cakewalk, right?
Hmm.
Only 5, 10 years from now, something may change in your world,
Exactly.
and all of a sudden you're going to be like, "Oh my God, now what do I do?" Right?
Exactly.
And without the skills, you're kind of hosed, you know?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that actually leads into our first question.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that you were the COO, I believe it was, of
Uh-huh.
Uplevel Works,
Yeah.
which, to my understanding, focuses on developing communication and leadership skills. So we just wanted to know, like, what this had to do with your decision to like move towards teaching skills, based on like mental wellness. I know you
Yeah.
just mentioned that like you've always had a background in like teaching skills and stuff, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, basically, did this help your transition?
So yeah, so Up Level was an interesting experiment. Well, startups, right, that don't work or they have to pivot.
Yeah.
When we started Up Level, we were actually going down the path of trying to figure out something that ultimately would become Heart, right?
Okay.
Um, and we were at that point in time thinking we needed to do live events
Hmm.
on site. So we rented an office in downtown San Jose. We started doing live events for people coming in. We were thinking about doing live coaching,
Hmm.
right, and training. And really, what we were going after was a corporate audience,
Okay.
and we were trying to get into big companies. And the underlying skills behind that were dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, and the things that we have in the Heart program right now.
Yeah.
Um, and along the way, what we found was that high, adults are really afraid to talk about this stuff. Um, Many times because they're afraid that if their company finds out that they're struggling with depression or anxiety or anything else,
Hmm.
that they'll get fired,
Yeah. That's
or that the next time there's a layoff, they'll be on the list and they'll be out the door,
yeah.
right?
That's like I think that's sort of like probably an unfortunate like aspect of the corporate world. Maybe like I mean
Right.
probably just like society in general.
Yeah, and the reality is that I'm not sure a company can actually do that to you.
Can they not?
Um, well, it's frowned upon if they fire you in the middle of your pregnancy,
Right. Yeah.
right? That puts you in a protected class.
Right.
And there's a variety of other medical environments where it's kind of frowned on if a company lets you go because you're struggling with something, right?
Yeah, I was just about to ask. I didn't know if like depression or mental health like constituted a protected class. So
Yeah, I don't know if it's. I don't know if it's. I'll have to do some research to find the answer to that question. But what I do know is that it's actually the opposite side, because when you start to learn these skills, like for me, when I started to learn these skills 15 years ago, I
Mhm.
became way more effective at work,
Mhm.
right? Like I wasn't born with these skills, right? There's no there's no magic thing that says if you're bald, you also get all these skills. It
Mhm.
doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
I had to go hunting and learn all these skills, and so and I was doing it from a I'm I mean, I look back on it and actually was suffering from depression and anxiety 15 years ago. Didn't know how to talk about it, was only looking at the symptoms. And I started saying, okay, how do I get rid of this symptom? What can I learn? Right.
Okay.
And it was about work. Right. I had really bad imposter syndrome.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, like I've heard like that's a pretty big thing, like especially with
yeah.
like really successful people, they just
Yep.
don't feel like they belong there.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think I had the skills to do the job that I had.
Okay.
Right. And and I also didn't feel like I could quit.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
you're
I
too
couldn't just
far
walk
into
away.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so um, I had some friends who helped me see that I had some of the skills that I needed,
Mhm.
and that helped me realize that I could learn the other skills.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I went after those. Now the big upside of that was all of a sudden my teams started performing really 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 well,
Uh-huh.
because one of the secrets of leadership is that when you can take care of your own mental space and your own emotional wellness, you're a much better leader for your team.
Exactly,
And all
yeah.
of a sudden, your team gets more productive,
Yeah, you
right?
can't exactly like, lead if you're not like, in a position to like, lead yourself. So it's hard to like,
Yeah.
the team.
You got to lead yourself first, then you can lead the team. And all of a
Exactly.
sudden, my teams are doing really well. And then uh, all of a sudden, I was getting tapped for special projects for the company
Mhm.
because, my team was, making the impossible possible
Right, yeah.
consistently over and over and over again, right? And all
Yeah.
of a sudden, the CEO's like, I want to talk to that guy. Like, what's
Yeah.
he doing? Right. And that, um, all of a sudden doors opened up that never would have opened up otherwise,
And
right?
it was like purely
Right.
because you decided to work on your like mental like
Yeah,
wellness, and made sure that you had the skills to like do that as to the best of your
exactly.
ability.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So that was like only possible because you were able to come out of that like black hole that you were in.
I had yeah, I mean, there are people who've had it much, much worse than I have, right?
Hmm.
mhm.
Um, I was fortunate that I had some underlying habits that kept my brain chemistry okay, right?
Mhm.
So um, a lot of the stuff, like if you guys, the module 5, we were talking about brain chemistry a lot, right?
Yeah,
We
I
talked
remember
about
that.
more in
Right.
module 6 and 7, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. I was doing things every day, most days, that got me all those brain chemicals. And so that kind of stabilized my floor of how bad it could get for me, because I
Right.
was getting exercise, I was getting out in the sun, I was hanging out with my kids, and those are all things that help my brain chemistry,
Yeah.
right? People that don't do that, they can go a lot deep, a lot darker than I got, because they don't have that support system, right? Uh,
Right. Yeah.
so I got lucky that I couldn't crash too far down,
Mhm.
as miserable as I was. But when my friends talked me out of resigning from this position, when all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. Um, One of the big ahas out of that conversation, um, was, oh, wait a minute, I actually have some skills that I've learned, and I can learn more skills, right? I can always learn more skills. And one of the things that we talk about is, um, that people do as a behavioral pattern that drives them into depression and anxiety, is they discount the positive and they amplify worrying about the negative. And
Yeah.
certainly that's what I was doing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and because of that, I wasn't seeing upsides, right? I was completely ignoring the fact that I actually had a bunch of skills that were going to help me get going in this role.
I feel like.
Um,
Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead. No, I think I didn't.
and so a keeping my brain chemistry at a place where it wasn't horrible, and having friends who gave me some perspective,
Mhm.
um, gave me the slack to go, okay, what's the first skill I need to go learn,
Yeah.
right? And there's no bad answer there. You're just like, I got to go learn, and I know there's a bunch of skills I need to learn. I'm going after that one first, and then I'm going after the next one, and the next one, the next one, the next one,
Yeah.
and work my way down the list. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned that you didn't really have like people could have had it worse than you, and
Mhm.
like you were able to maintain that by keeping your brain chemistry stable, and you had like friends and family, I guess, that helped you.
Mhm.
But what would you say are like some other tools for people who are like just at rock bottom, like to help them come out of it and become mentally well?
Or yeah, maybe just even like stay mentally healthy. Like,
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
this sounds really simple, because it is, because maintaining our brain chemistry at the most fundamental level, it's not hard to do. You just have to do it, right?
exactly.
Kind of like, do you guys brush your teeth on a regular basis?
Yeah, twice a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect, right? So something you probably don't know, because you're probably, neither one of you is 100 plus years old,
Mhm.
but 100 years ago, if I'd asked you that question, you both would have said, what's a toothbrush?
Right.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
100 years ago, toothbrush didn't exist. And the foremost tool for dentists was a pair of pliers. And when you went to go see the dentist, who was really probably the local barber, he would just get a pair of pliers and rip the tooth out of your mouth, because that's all they did, right? Dentistry, oral hygiene as we know it today, didn't start until the late 1940s.
Hmm.
So you take for granted that you get healthy teeth, but 100 years ago, like, my grandfather had a mouthful of dentures because he was born in 1900, right?
yeah,
Um, So it's, so what we're talking about is maintaining your brain chemistry, right? It's really simple stuff. Get exercise of some kind every day. Go for a walk around the block, right? It's not like you got to go and hammer out a bunch of heavy weights or run 10 miles. It's go get some movement, right? For at least 15 minutes. And it doesn't have to be hard. Get sunshine every day, because sunshine gets you vitamin D, which helps to generate serotonin. Um, be around other people, because that gets you oxytocin, right? Like physically. If you've got pets and your pets want to hang out with you, awesome. More oxytocin. Um, those are the easy, get sunshine, get exercise, get around other people. Oh, and get sleep, right? Sleep does a ton for your brain chemistry in terms of one, the trash removal part of the metabolism for your brain is when you're asleep. So when you quit sleeping, the trash removal in your brain doesn't happen, right? And it's kind of like your house, right? You can fill the trash can, and then you can put a bag in the kitchen that's from the trash can, but sooner or later it's going to get disgusting, and you got to get trash out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So sleep, exercise, sunshine, be around other people. That's kind of the core. And if you can do that, that really, really helps a ton.
Yeah.
And it's so
Basically.
simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, this isn't hard stuff to do, but you need to make it a habit. And the
Exactly.
thing that saved me 15, 14 years ago was I had this habit where I went for bike rides most days of the week, right?
Hmm.
And that was getting me out in sunshine, and it was getting me exercise. I had two small kids, and they needed a lot of physical attention. And so I got oxytocin from that. My sleep wasn't as good, but I tried to sleep. I wasn't trying to stay up until 4 a.m.
Right.
And so, because I knew I had to get to work the next day, and I didn't want to fall asleep
Yeah.
in the middle of my commute,
I
right?
feel like you can
Um,
never get like good sleep with like, two kids, but yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Sleep is not only underrated for like just high school students, but I'm sure parents don't really get that much.
everybody. Yeah, yeah. So those simple things were really the they were, and they still are, the foundation for brain chemistry.
Hmm.
And one of the things to keep in mind is that if you go see a psychiatrist and they prescribe meds for you, literally they're giving you meds to get your brain chemistry back to a baseline. So rather than going to see a psychiatrist, I just hop on my bike and go for a bike ride, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think
I hang out with my kids, right?
being a good way of like just saying that is like basically living healthily is like a great way to stay mentally healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Um, and then the other, I tend to think of like, how do I explain this in the most simple fashion, right? And so Barbara and I kind of talk about this all the time. And on the one hand, it's maintaining your brain chemistry, right? On the other hand, is what are the things that you're thinking that get in the way of your success? And um, the catch it, check it, change it process from module 5, maybe I think it's module 5. I can't remember it. Might be in 6, but that's a really good process that allows us to look and figure out when our thoughts are getting in the way of us being happy, right?
Hmm.
14 years ago when I was struggling because I thought I wasn't good enough for the role, right? And I wasn't taking a step back and looking at the actual reality and going, oh, wait a minute, for this role, I need these 5 skills. I have 3 of them already, right? I'm not starting with 0. I'm starting with 3. I can learn 4 and 5, and I can move ahead, right? Oh, and by the way, I learned 6 and 7, and all of a sudden now all this other stuff goes on. Um, the the Buddhists say that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you think about it.
Hmm.
And that's one of those things where if we can recognize how our thought processes about things are what drives us into those holes, then we can go, wait a minute, what are my thought processes? What am I thinking right now that's driving me in a bad direction? Right.
Right. Yeah. So
And
like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think that was a great answer. Thank you. Um, but so basically, brain chemistry, getting sunshine, living healthy, like Aditya said, I think these are things that people really need to like master before like progressing through life. So that being said, how early do you think like people should try to like learn these things so that they don't have to run into problems later? Because like in elementary schools at least and like middle school,
Mhm.
they don't really have like heart modules or like Cassie or anything like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think there's age appropriate ways to start this in kindergarten.
Oh,
Right.
so you think you can start like as early as like 5 or 6?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Right. Because I mean, think about it. How old were you when you learned how to brush your teeth? Right.
early, yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
early.
I started teaching my kids how to brush their teeth when they were less than a year old, right? When they started having teeth, we started teaching them how to brush their teeth, right? And they weren't very good early on, right? They were pretty uncoordinated and it was really challenging and they didn't like it. And that's okay, right? Because part of part of the learning process is having the persistence and understanding the value, right?
Mhm.
Of moving ahead with that. My younger son over the last year, all of a sudden is super meticulous about brushing his teeth.
Mhm.
He's suddenly hit this place where he's like, oh my God, I need to keep my teeth clean. I'm not really sure what happened, but all of a sudden, his mental model around that has a much higher value on making sure that he brushes his teeth twice a day, right? Used to be, I'm sure there were days he skipped it, right? Because I wasn't super militant. Because I figured, you know, every couple of days I'll remind him you got to brush your teeth, but he's learning how to be responsible, right?
Yeah.
Now I ask him, he's like, yep, just brush my teeth. Just did it, you know, and I'm like, good. I see your stuff in the bathroom, right? You can start to teach people skills when they're in kindergarten, right? Go outside, get some exercise. Like, and it's not rocket science, right? It's like go outside, get some exercise, leave your devices inside if you've got one at 5, right? Make sure you get a good night's sleep. It's good for your brain chemistry. Make sure that you're eating reasonably well. It's good for your brain chemistry, right? And as you get older, you start adding in more complex whys, right? And start talking about things like at the beginning, you start teaching the basic things to keep your brain chemistry at the most baseline level, right? And
Mhm.
as they get older, you start talking about, okay, why are you afraid to go do this thing, right? What is it that has you be uncomfortable with getting up in front of the class and speaking?
Yeah, yeah. Like basically, you think that like it's important to like break down these skills to like a year by year basis,
Yeah,
that so
yeah,
that we can like build up for them to
yep,
be prepared when they
yeah,
start have a bigger like issue.
yeah. And it's the thing that people don't that they don't really take the time to think through is what is the opposite? What's the complete polar opposite of having a mental health problem, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of like, what is the polar opposite of having cavities and
Mhm.
teeth problems is having really healthy teeth and not worrying about stuff,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? That's the polar opposite. The polar opposite of not knowing how to swim is someone who surfs and they go whitewater rafting and they're windsurfing and they're doing everything in the water they want to because they're comfortable and they have freedom, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And if you're somebody who doesn't know how to swim at all and you're terrified of the water, you might not be able to wrap your head around the idea of that other end of the spectrum, right? But you can learn and you can work your way up to that point, right?
Yeah.
So you start the kids off. Here's the basic stuff to do when you're 5 years old, because you're in school and the teachers can start to teach it, and they can start talk about why when they're 8.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe they won't understand it, but like it'll at least give them a foundation, like go
right,
off when they become like
right,
12,
right,
13.
yeah. And so as you're building up the practices, you start to talk about the why behind it. Like, I don't know about you, but when I was 6 and I was learning how to do math, I had no idea that I would need it professionally. Like, I just did math because the teacher said to, right? Right now I'm doing statistical analysis. I didn't know that I would be doing statistical analysis as part of my day job when I was 12, right? But I learned the math skills, right, to allow me to do stuff today. There's all these things that you learn in school, all throughout school, that's really geared for getting you ready for your career and your life after you get out of school, and keeping your head well organized and keeping yourself mentally healthy is at least as valuable, if not more valuable, than knowing how to read and knowing how to do math, right? So I'd say we start, realistically, start teaching kids techniques at 5 years old and start working them up the stack.
So I just want to know, in your opinion, what's the most pressing mental health issue that Bay Area students face right now, and how can like our students in the community alleviate that issue for themselves?
Or yeah, not even just the Bay Area, like just teenagers in
Yeah,
general.
like maybe just like teenagers and high school students. Like,
Yeah.
well,
Wow. Woof. Feels like I have the power of the universe now, so I can answer this question.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I think there's a few different parts to this, right? I've got a college freshman, I've got a high school sophomore, Barbara's got a high school junior and a middle schooler, right? And we interview them and their friends all the time, right? They're probably annoyed with it by now. I would say that one of the most common things that we hear is that students feel powerless to make stuff happen in the world, and they don't have a lot of confidence in themselves. And the reality is that, and it seems like they're waiting for some magic event to suddenly give them confidence. And from what we see, confidence is a byproduct of actually doing stuff. Like, you go and you do stuff. Like, Aditya, you like playing with cars, right? You go work on cars and you do a lot of stuff with cars, and one day you'll realize that you can build that shelf behind you because the stuff you've done with cars has given you mental models that allows that to become easy.
exactly. Yeah, sort of like, yeah, you build like the foundation of the skills for like.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's this concept of skills recycling where
Yeah.
you learn a skill and then something else that you see, you're like, oh, that's 85% of what I was doing with this other thing, right? Mm-hmm. The first database that I learned was a company that doesn't exist anymore, right? Mm-hmm. Way back in the day. They remember me, they got acquired and got rolled into something else. But then the next database that I learned was Oracle. And I was like, oh, Oracle, okay, great, let's figure this out. And then the next database I learned after that was another company that probably doesn't exist anymore. Different database architecture style, right? And then I learned MySQL and Postgres. Well, by the time I got to learning MySQL, I had so much foundation from the other stuff that the new addition of another database was like 5%, right? It's nominal. It's like that with everything else. If you learn how to frame a house, like the most basic carpentry, mm-hmm. you can put in a doorway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
It's similar things like.
Yeah. In school, you start to learn skills. You can start to build up your library of skills of anything, right? Editing videos. So Hill's going to go edit a video, right? That's actually a valuable skill to have, right? Exactly. As time goes on, he's going to start learning how to get effects in his videos, and he's going to put in audio overlays on his videos, right? And he's going to be doing all these different splicing and transition and different things in a lot of different ways. And if suddenly he gets a new tool for editing videos, he'll look at it and go, oh, I get it, because this is 80% like the other thing I already knew how to do, right?
Right. So you're saying like it's very important to understand concepts by actually going out and doing stuff.
Yes.
So then you're confident in doing things in the future.
there was a science fiction book that Robert Heinlein, he's an old science fiction author, he wrote years ago, and he has this quote in one of the books that a human should be able to do, and he lists off like 30 things, right? You should be able to change a diaper and fix a generator and mend a wound and deliver a baby and cook a good dinner and mow the yard, like all this stuff, right? And the reality is that, yeah, that's right. If the more things you know how to do, the more things that you're comfortable stepping into and playing with, right? And practice, like, just go do stuff, even if you start off by doing it badly. So the first thing is learn a bunch of skills all over the place and actually do them, right? Not just intellectually, but actually do them. The second thing is start messy and be happy to start messy, because that's where you get to learn the most stuff, right? When we as babies learn how to walk, there's a huge amount of stuff we have to learn, because standing up and walking is actually quite complicated. And yet we take it for granted because we've been doing it for a while. Walking may be the hardest thing we ever learn in our lives, but we forget because we do it so young, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
If you ever so I broke my femur when I was a teenager and I had to relearn how to walk. That sucked. Like, there's a lot of stuff you got to do. And I remember, like, holy cow, I whole new respect for babies, right? Because I actually had a mental model of how to walk, but I couldn't get my body to do it, right? And all of a sudden I had to relearn all this stuff. So, and I was super messy. Like, I passed out and hit the floor multiple times. So one, you want to learn a bunch of skills. Two, you've got to be messy. And three, you got to be curious.
Exactly. Yeah.
Curiosity is huge, because nobody knows all the answers. And, the more you can learn and go, oh my God, I had no idea, this is amazing, the better it is, right? Elon Musk is kind of my poster child for people that are curious, because Elon never says, oh, I'm an expert, right? He's talked about being an expert being a really, really, really bad thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then you miss all these other things that are available from your curiosity. And we have less than a minute.